Why doing nothing is the most powerful move. Taoism explains, I want you to imagine this. You're standing at the edge of a cliff. Below you, the ocean crashes against the rocks. Behind you, the world is shouting, telling you to do more, be more, achieve more. Hustle culture screams in your ear, productivity gurus sell you 1,000 tips, and every app on your phone is demanding your attention. You feel like if you stop, even for a moment, you'll fall behind. But what if I told you that the most powerful move you could make right now, right here, is to do absolutely nothing? I know. That sounds insane. It feels like surrender, like failure. But stay with me, because this video isn't about giving up, it's about waking up. Taoism, one of the oldest philosophical traditions in the world, teaches something radically different from what modern society values. Where we're taught to push, Taoism teaches us to yield. Where we're told to strive, Taoism tells us to let go. And where we're told to act, Taoism whispers a secret, Wu Wei, the art of non-action.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
But Wu Wei doesn't mean laziness. It doesn't mean sitting on a couch binge-watching shows. It's far deeper, far more powerful. Wu Wei means aligning yourself so perfectly with the flow of the universe that your actions become effortless, natural, and profoundly effective. It means trusting the river rather than fighting the current. It means pausing not because you're stuck, but because the power lies in the stillness. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you just sat and breathed, without a goal, without a plan, without trying to get somewhere? When did you last let life unfold without interfering? We're programmed to believe that if we aren't doing something, we're wasting our lives. But Taoism flips that belief on its head. It says, if you're always doing, you might be missing everything. I once read a Taoist parable about a farmer whose horse ran away. His neighbors came to console him. Such bad luck, they said. But the farmer replied, maybe. The next day, the horse returned bringing with it 3 wild horses. And the neighbors celebrated, what good fortune. Again, the farmer said, maybe. Then the farmer's son tried to tame one of the horses and broke his leg. The neighbors cried, such tragedy. But the farmer only said, maybe. Later, soldiers came to recruit young men for war, but left the son behind because of his broken leg. Now the neighbors called him lucky. And again, the farmer said, maybe. This story isn't about indifference. It's about the power of non-interference. The farmer didn't react wildly to each event. He didn't rush to judge, to fix, to label. He did nothing, and yet he saw everything. His stillness allowed him to live in harmony with life's unfolding, rather than be tossed around by every change. Think about your own life. How often do you overreact? How often do you try to control outcomes only to make things worse? How many times have you forced a decision only to regret it later? We're taught to fear uncertainty. But Taoism shows us that uncertainty is the natural state of things. And in that uncertainty, doing nothing, waiting, observing, being present can be the most powerful move of all. You see, when we stop trying to control, we begin to listen. When we stop forcing, we begin to feel. And when we stop doing, we begin to be. Wu Wei teaches us to trust the intelligence of life itself. Not because life is always kind, but because it is always wiser than our limited vision. Let me give you a personal example. Years ago, I hit a breaking point. I had worked myself into exhaustion, chasing success, chasing meaning, chasing something. I burned out so badly that I couldn't even get out of bed. My body shut down. My mind was fog. I felt like a failure. But in that stillness, something strange happened. I began to notice things I had ignored for years: the sound of the wind, the texture of silence, the beauty of simply existing. I stopped trying to fix myself. I stopped trying to be someone. And in that non-doing, I became more connected, more alive, more myself than ever before. That was Wu Wei. Doing nothing in that moment was not weakness. It was wisdom. But society hates this idea. It fears it. Because if too many people stopped doing, if too many people paused and reflected, then the whole machine might slow down. And maybe that's what we need. Not collapse, but a return. A return to what actually matters. Taoism isn't telling you to quit your job and sit under a tree. It's showing you that doing is not always the answer. Sometimes, the most profound transformation comes not from action, but from inaction. But ask yourself this: what if your next breakthrough isn't something you achieve, but something you allow? What if the path you're forcing isn't the path meant for you? What if the most powerful thing you can do today is nothing at all? The paradox of effort. Why letting go makes you more powerful. We live in a world that worships effort. From the moment we're born, we're taught that trying harder is the only way to get anywhere. We're told to grind, to hustle, to push through. And it's not entirely wrong. Effort can be noble. But what if it's not the only way? What if, in some cases, effort is actually the obstacle? What if the very thing you're straining to control is the thing you need to release? Taoism presents us with the paradox: the more you try to control life, the more it escapes you. The more you let go, the more life flows toward you. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you grip, the faster it slips through your fingers. But if you cup your palms gently, the water stays. This is not just poetic, it's profoundly practical. Think about relationships. How often do we try to force love, to make someone stay, to mold them into what we want? And how often does that pushing lead to resentment, distance, or collapse? Now think of the people you love most deeply. Isn't it usually those who allow you to be fully yourself that you feel closest to? This is the paradox of effort. Sometimes the most powerful move is to stop trying so hard. It's not giving up, it's giving space. And that space can allow something far more authentic to emerge. Taoism calls this the principle of Wu Wei, but it also shows up in other traditions. The Stoics talked about the importance of accepting what you cannot control. Zen teaches us that the path to enlightenment is not through striving, but through surrender. Even in modern psychology, we're learning that some types of anxiety are worsened by our efforts to suppress them. The more we resist, the more they persist. But when we allow the feeling to be there without judgment, without resistance, it often begins to dissolve. Now, I want to challenge you with a question that might change the way you see your entire life. What are you holding on to so tightly that it's actually holding you back? Is it the idea of who you're supposed to be? A dream that no longer fits? A relationship that's draining you? A fear that you haven't dared to name? Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. And that distinction is everything. There's a story from the Taoist tradition about a man who falls into a river and is swept toward a waterfall. People on the shore panic, sure that he will die. But moments later, he emerges downstream, completely unharmed. But when asked how he survived, he says, "I didn't fight the water. I went with it." He didn't resist the current. He became one with it. That's not weakness. That's mastery. In our own lives, we often think we're being strong by resisting what is. But real strength lies in adaptation, not force. In flexibility, not rigidity. Think of bamboo. It bends with the wind, but it doesn't break. A rigid tree snaps in the storm. In the same way, when we let go of the illusion of control, we gain access to a deeper kind of power, a power that isn't about domination, but about alignment. And here's the wild thing: when you stop trying to force outcomes, things often begin to fall into place on their own. You meet the right person when you stop desperately seeking. You find clarity when you stop obsessing over answers. You rest, and suddenly solutions emerge that weren't visible when you were burning yourself out. Why? Because your mind, like water, becomes clear when it's still. Stir it constantly, and it stays muddy. So the next time you're in a moment of stress when things aren't going your way, pause. Ask yourself, am I trying to force this? Or is there a deeper current I need to trust? There's immense courage in choosing to let go. It may feel risky, but in truth, it's the beginning of real freedom. What if the solution to your biggest problem isn't one more push, but one deep breath? Stillness as a superpower. How doing nothing reveals everything. Stillness. In a world obsessed with movement, just that word can feel threatening. Stillness feels like delay, like idleness, like falling behind. But what if that's only because we've been taught to equate motion with progress? What if, instead, stillness is not the absence of activity, but the presence of awareness? What if stillness is not empty, but full, brimming with clarity, insight, and truth? Taoism teaches us that stillness is not a retreat from life, but a return to its source. It's the space in which life reveals itself. Think of the surface of a lake. When it's agitated, you see only chaos. But when it becomes still, it reflects the sky. Stillness is a mirror. It shows us our true nature and the nature of everything around us. But most of us are terrified of that mirror. Because in stillness, there are no distractions, no busy schedules to hide behind, no noise to drown out the deeper questions. In stillness, we are forced to meet ourselves. And that is where the power lies. In doing nothing, truly nothing, not scrolling, not planning, not escaping, we finally create space for life to speak to us. We notice the breath, the heartbeat, the tension we've been carrying in our shoulders for days. We hear the thoughts we've been avoiding and feel the emotions we've buried. This can be uncomfortable, but it can also be profoundly healing. Because awareness is the first step to transformation. Taoism doesn't say you must change. It says you must see. And in seeing clearly, change happens naturally. Just like a tree doesn't try to grow, it simply grows when the conditions are right. Stillness creates those conditions. It's the fertile soil from which insight, peace, and even action can grow. Have you ever noticed how your best ideas often come when you're doing nothing in the shower, on a walk, just lying in bed staring at the ceiling? That's not coincidence. That's your mind finally having the space to breathe. When we step away from the noise of doing, we step into the wisdom of being. And in that space we start to see patterns, connections, truths that were invisible before. One of the most powerful practices in Taoism is observing nature, not analyzing it, not using it, but simply sitting with it, watching a stream flow, listening to the wind move through trees, noticing how everything in nature does what it does without striving. The flower doesn't rush to bloom. The sun doesn't force itself to rise faster. Everything unfolds in its own time, in its own way. And we are part of that nature. So why do we think we're different? Why do we believe that only through relentless effort can we be worthy? Stillness reminds us we are already enough. But stillness is not passive. It's not apathy. It's a conscious choice to be present, to stop reacting, to step out of the whirlwind and anchor ourselves in awareness. From that place, anything we do becomes more intentional, more aligned. In fact, the most effective action often arises from stillness. Like an archer who waits until the target is clear rather than firing blindly, or a surfer who watches the waves, feeling the rhythm, waiting for the perfect moment, not trying to control the ocean, but learning to move with it. Stillness is not a lack of power. It's concentrated power. It's the difference between a light bulb and a laser. One scatters energy. The other focuses it to the point that it can cut through steel. So I'll ask you this: when was the last time you gave yourself permission to be still, not because you were exhausted, not because you were sick, but simply because you knew it was wise? What would happen if you stopped running for just one day? Who might you become if you stopped trying to become someone? The irony is, when we stop trying to shape ourselves, we begin to discover who we really are. And when we stop forcing outcomes, we begin to see that life has been offering us openings all along. Stillness reveals not just what is happening, but what matters. The final move, how non-action creates the ultimate transformation. By now, we've walked through the valleys of letting go, the paradox of effort, and the profound silence of stillness. And yet, the most powerful insight of them all still waits in the shadows. Non-action Wu Wei is not just a philosophy of passivity. It is the final master move. It is transformation without force, mastery without dominance, wisdom without words. It's not about doing nothing out of fear, laziness, or resignation. It's about doing nothing because you've learned to trust something deeper than your ego, deeper than your plans, deeper than your need to control. It's about becoming part of the unfolding instead of fighting it. Transformation, real transformation, is not dramatic. It's not loud or flashy. It doesn't come in a moment of grand decision. It often comes silently, like a tree growing when no one is watching, like the tide turning in the night. And when we practice non-action, we don't stop living, we start living more consciously. We begin to act only when it's time to act. We speak only when there's truth to speak. We move only when movement is necessary. And in doing so, every action becomes more powerful because it's rooted in alignment, not impulse. Have you ever seen someone walk into a room and say nothing, yet their presence shifts the energy entirely? That's Wu Wei. That's the power we tap into when we stop doing for the sake of doing and start being with the flow of things. That's the kind of transformation Taoism points to, one that doesn't require you to change yourself violently, but to return to who you already are underneath the noise. The Tao Te Ching says, "The master does nothing, yet leaves nothing undone. What a strange statement. How can you do nothing and still leave nothing undone? It sounds like a riddle, but it's actually a mirror. It reflects a way of living where your actions are so attuned to the moment, so free of ego, that they ripple outward with maximum effect and minimal effort. You become like water, soft, yet unstoppable. Think of water. It doesn't fight the rock, it flows around it, and over time it shapes even the hardest stone. That's the essence of Wu Wei, not resisting, not forcing, but transforming everything through presence, persistence, and peace. In our own lives, this might look like choosing silence in an argument, not out of weakness, but out of strength. It might look like waiting a little longer before making a decision, letting clarity rise instead of rushing into confusion. It might look like stepping back from someone you love, not because you don't care, but because you trust that space will do more than your words ever could. And here's the secret no one tells you. When you stop trying to change the world, you often begin to change it more deeply than you ever imagined. Because people don't transform when you pressure them. They transform when they feel seen, accepted, and safe. And often, the greatest gift you can give someone is your non-interference, your stillness, your trust. So here we are, at the edge of the cliff again. But this time, we're not afraid, because we know that doing nothing isn't falling behind, it's falling into life, into rhythm, into the mysterious intelligence that has been guiding everything long before we ever arrived. You don't have to chase the Tao, you are already part of it. So, let me ask you one final question, and I want you to really sit with it. No rushing, no answers, just presence. But what would your life look like if you finally stopped resisting it? And that question could be your beginning, or your return, or maybe both.